and welcome to this panel discussion for Bangalore Poetry Festival. We have with us Asia Zahoor and Mark bin Bilal, both very prominent poets writing in English. We will get to hear their poems today and also have a little bit of discussion with them. So that's a great opportunity we have had to meet each other and have this conversation. Um, the session today is called "If I Could Write This in Fire." It was the title of a Latin American anthology, and and it's also the title of a poem by Mars, which he got inspired from and wrote. I hope we get to hear this poem today. Uh, uh, Let me first introduce the poets we have, and then we will invite the poets and get to hear their work. So let me first introduce Asia. Asia Zahoor has written books and articles on the literature of exile, Kashmiri literature, and psycholinguistics. Her film, The Stitch, has won the Critics Award for Best Film at the Second South Asian Film Festival, among other awards, and has been screened at various festivals internationally. Her latest book is a collection of poems entitled Serpents Under My Veil. She has been awarded Ford Foundation Fellowship to study at Oxford and has been recently awarded Stanford Taylor Fellowship by the University of Cornell, USA. She is currently teaching at Tanmar College in Baramulla, Kashmir. Welcome, Asia. We also have Maz bin Bilal with us. Maz bin Bilal is the author of Ghazal Nama, poems from Delhi, Belfast, and Urdu, published by Yoda Press in 2019, and the translator of Fikr Tonsvi's Partition Journal, The Sixth River, Speaking Tiger, 2019 is the publisher. 2019 is the year when it was published. He was Charles Wallace India Trust Fellow in Translation and Creative Writing in Wales in 2018-19. Mars teaches literary studies at Jindal Global University and is currently working on the translation of Mirza Ghalib's Persian long poem on Benares, Chirag-e-Dair. Welcome, Mars. We are very lucky to have you with us.
My pleasure.
So may I first invite Asia to read some of her work and then we will get to hear Mars's work as well. So Asia, over to you.
Thank you very much, Saurav, for this generous introduction. And thank you, Bangalore Poetry Festival, for inviting us over. It's a pleasure to be, on a panel with you as well as with Mars. I admire your works. So today I'm going to start with a poem which is titled Story of a Grand Old Chinar, Kashmir's Plane Tree in Love with a Young Girl. So it's a poem about a young girl and her love for a chinar tree. I have seen her eyes searching my green shade in summer when elks emerge from the forest. The girl hid in the hollow of my womb, playing Zuni, yearning for Yusuf. I turned green to red to yellow to brown to saffron on fire as she flicked seasons, waiting for her love. Peals of laughter playing luckad lullabies born under my branches. So many stories of childhood. Now a bent woman, flushed crumpled like a first draft of a poem, discarded as an afterthought, peeked through the windows at her father. Peace be upon him, pounding with bare hands, sheepskin stretched across the belly of a long-necked clay tumbaknar. In Farsi, Che is what? Nar, fire, chinar, chinar. What fire? Whose lilt? I, proverbial fire, chinar. Her smile softened furrows. I was stark jealous as she kissed her lover under my branches. I stole her shadow, hid it deep within me, resolved never to give it back. Now she looks for it everywhere. Enraged, she wants to burn me down. How dare she? I am the invisible memory of the size of truant lip locks. Am I not the link to the silk threads she tied to wooden tulips at Sufi shrines? Will not the dream threads burn down with me? Will not the aftertaste of kisses vanish? I know I'm stalking the surreal, dreaming of an odd consummation of a young girl by a shady old chinner. I'm keeping watch at the paradise while toothless history snores under my shade. The roots of my history are in Kashmir. The history of Kashmir is in my roots. The sun caresses my branches. I give the sun my golden streaks. Many loiter by me. So who has carved amnesia on my bark? Leisurely, not just he. Trees don't remember their roots. Open wounds free sparks, stirring lol zuni to sing lol ghazals. I hum the dirge of your language, whose letters were enslaved. Paper having left the tree in a peak. Jhelum flings her waves at fires, breaks banks to drown Srinagar in the flood of the century. Every 3 decades, shikarawalas, raw emerald shikaras, heart-shaped oars undulate the full moon. I shed memory, girdling. Men can't be my saviors. My distress won't bestow daring. I await men with chainsaws to behead me. Oh, the vanity of violence! A headless Chinar still says resistance. Standing tall is my dharma. Once bountiful, I am now a registered state property. Across the white turban peaks, across the festering wounds of empallated after stump, ricocheting on hamlets of jackboots, whose troop bashly in a single file, on the firmness of the shriveled breast from the tree of life, goodbye to life. Chinar, fear and cure. Chinar, Chinar. What fire is this? Whose fire is this? Fire is. So that's the end of the poem. And do we have time for, if we have time, I'll read another poem.
Yes, absolutely.
I'm starting with the second poem now. The poem is titled, I am a bird of a yet to be born garden. This is a title taken from one of Ghalib's ghazals. Nah, I'm not an artist. For art seeks ledger. My need is immediate. I'm trying to steal your shadow, running against time, trying to hold water in a wicker basket, as we once did. I'm trying to safeguard your myths in my palm, but my hands are too small. I'm afraid myths might slip or hands may leak. I'm racing with whales before they fly away like birds without reaching half their ears. I tried to safeguard your ghazals, sun-dried with chili peppers for winter, wrapped in obituaries of poets who died too young. I'm forcing memory to resurrect lines buried in dusty newspapers, in gloomy archive centers. I so wish one day I'll free those lines, create my own lyrics, leave no scope for a pale orchestra playing the Shalimar. Concert goers hedged by concertina wire.
Okay.
Brilliant, brilliant. May I now invite Maz to read a few of his poems, share a few of his poems with us. Thank you, Asya. Your poems are brilliant. I mean, I have read your work in the past, and such prominent, powerful voice that comes out. It's really inspiring.
Thank
And
you very much for your feedback.
yeah, Maz,
Thank you, Saurabh, and thank you, Bangalore Poetry Festival, to have me here on this panel. Asia's work I've read before. I've been on a panel before with her too, and I absolutely admire her work as well. Saurabh mentioned my poem from Ghazalnama, If I Could Write This in Fire, and he's been generous enough to call the panel that as well. I'm afraid I won't be reading that quite. It's an earlier poem of mine, it's a love poem. I'll read a later poem from my collection, Ghazalnama, which is also a love poem, but by this time I had also realized the more radical political potential of love itself, I think. And it's called Caravans of Love. And this also takes its title from somewhere else, from Harshmandar's Karwan-e Mohabbat. It's sort of an obeisance to his work as well. And it is a love poem nonetheless. Love, of course, has great potential to uplift societies as well. And to move us, get us moving out of our narrow shell. So this is Caravans of Love after Harshmandar. To breathe of your breath, not to die in love. Rebellion must be all, defy in love. Sameness is the bane of this life. To difference I go to test and try in love. What are my limits? the test of your patience. I can wage holy wars while cry in love. Ethics of the other, all pleasures for myself. Accept, commit, care, comply in love. To see this world with not 2 but 4 eyes. When revelations all your sky in love, the faults of the moon, the heat of the stars, forget desire, dream to fly in love. Lead caravans of love, touch people's misery. Love's bond, love's politics. Love, 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 love. Go on, forget your I in love. So that's the first poem I wanted to read. I'll now read from poetry that I've written since the collection was published. The first I want to read here, if I have time, I might read another shorter one after this, but the first I want to read is called Pebbles. It's a slightly longer poem in 6 parts. This I wrote during my stay for the fellowship in Wales in Aberystwyth. It's a beach town, and all the beaches are strewn with pebbles. So therefore, pebbles. First, pebbles are never lonely, always in touch with one another, like grains of sand, only bigger. But even when reduced, redeemed to a particle, they never fuse. Each one distinct, each lonely. Second, a heart-shaped pebble is not easily found and sells for 15 pounds, framed by glass to be stared at by all and sundry, even when hung in your house by the sea. Third, cobble streets lead nowhere, made of large-sized pebbles. A matter of semantics, 64 to 256 mm. They hurt the feet, despite the metal short jackboot that seeks to crush the stone beneath. 4. Cephos were cast into 2 urns in ancient Greece. He whose urn had more pebbles always came out on top. But what of the pebbles that are forever cast in minority? Land runs short for us, the wretched of the earth. Pebbles smashed out by the seas. A child comes along, throws a few back in, but out again into the margins, us without a polity. 6th, pebbles. They're varied. I pick some up, hurl them back in, just to let the ocean know you might be all powerful, but we are not asleep. So those are the 2 poems I wanted to read. Do I have time for a short one?
Yes, please. Yes, Mars. Absolutely.
Okay. So just give me a moment. This is a poem that I wrote and published recently during the lockdown itself. It responds to the lockdown, the disease, the pandemic, and the political events that we saw in India prior to that. And that still continue, of course. So the poem is called Who Did It? It's a ghazal again. The call of the lapwing sounds at night. Who did it? On which detection must we alight? Who did it? The whole town was witness to the crime nonetheless. The hakim forces the victim right. Who did it? A plague is afoot, sifting through humanity. Who spread it? Where did it come? Isn't it right? Who did it? Where we go from here may scream to the skies of the bravery of all those who fight. Who did it? Nature's self-correction, the sins of the fathers. Did a God will this to set aright? Who did it? I am drunk on wine and they are on power. Who'll adjudge who is wrong, who is right? Who did it? The rich live in isolation in large bungalows. Abdul, who built that house, must fight who did it. Deserts of loneliness and ghettos and camps. Who put them there and set them alight? Who did it? Birds still chirp, humor persists, there's laughter, Omars. Do not write poetry from pain to spite. Who did it? Thank you.
Wow, brilliant, brilliant. Asia, if you are okay with it, would you like to share one more poem? Because uh, I mean, we would really like to hear one more poem by you, if you have the poem around.
I loiter on these pages, my defined space, mine alone. You can't scare me, tapping the watch on your wrist. I stroll between errors with the stray stroke of my pen. My bare body cruises on blank, lines dissolve into nothingness. I splash myself with blue ink periodically, a squish of red. Words grow at my command. You can't tell me how much to show or tell, or save myself from your probing gaze. I drift in between stanzas, I meander through lines, I roam and ramble, I wander up, down, to conceive, out of whisper, this.
Nice. Wow. The voice as it was a little unclear, but it's understandable that you are joining us from Kashmir, and the internet there is a little bad. So to the viewers here, we will make sure that the text of the poetry is made available for you to read as well. Thank you so much, Asia. We'll move on to the discussion. I have a couple of questions I wanted to share. I wanted to ask you. My first question is the obvious one, which is also related to the title, writing in fire. If we could write in fire, if you could write in fire, why is it important today to write in fire, given the kind of political and social situation? Even Mars' poem Pebble was a metaphor on the marginalized. So what is your thoughts on that? I mean, why is it important to write, and what are the challenges that Asia, you as a writer, and Mars, you as a writer, face today and functioning in today's society and the times that we're living in? So Asia, maybe you can answer it first, and then we'll move on to more.
I think for any poet or to be in a state where you do not feel at home with the political, ideological, or even some personal situation, it's already made so that the sense of belonginglessness, which you definitely try to then bring into your poetry, and that's how it is, and this is what has been happening. I mean, this has been happening, like from ages, not just now, but yeah, considering the situation uh, right now, I think this also prompts the many people to write the way they write, to give vent to their, as Marx's point says, writing in fire, and to give vent to that kind of feelings that they have within them. So yeah, it is, on the one hand, it is sort of limiting because there is censorship, but it's also for some people, it's also a reason to that they write,
Okay. Mars, what are your thoughts on this?
Hi. So, couple of things. I think as we are holding this panel, the poet Varavara Rao has been in the news and has been written about quite a bit in the last week. He is in prison. He has been diagnosed with COVID-19. He is in a hospital, but apparently kept in a bad condition. He's not being allowed to interact with his family easily. The condition that the family is described from the one time that they did manage to have some kind of visit to the hospital was that he was lying on a bed soaked in urine. And he is a poet. He's a Kannada poet. And of course, he is in prison at a time during which we are experiencing the pandemic the world over, a deadly disease to which he is particularly susceptible as a man who's, I think, 79 or 80 or thereabouts. Uh, so clearly, words seem to be threatening our regimes greatly. But at the same time, people who believe in social justice and are sensitive to other people and their conditions around, uh, the least they can do is to respond through their words. And as society around us, in many ways across the world, tends to grow more exclusionary, um, many of us feel this need to speak out at a time when it is becoming difficult to speak easily. And one only wishes that one's words had the potency of of fire itself, to redeem and recreate, and to create a new. And that's what at least we try through our words. But I think it's also it is utopian, and I think poets are. To go back to the romantics, it is they try to be legislators of the world, but they aren't. Politicians are, in a practical day-to-day sense. Yet, I think the effort is that people at large might just listen, and might just listen to other ideas which are utopian, and in which many of us would be able to lead, or all of us ideally would be able to lead better lives.
Mhm. It's a great thought you put forward. All of us are praying for Varvara's release and good health. Let's just hope we see more work by Varvara Rao in the days to come, and a better. Let's hope for better times. We are all striving for it. We are all. Uh, it's a collective struggle. I think that unites us as a community. Uh, my second question is about the Indian English language poetry itself. Of course, it's a debated term. Should we have a term called Indian English poetry or Indian English poets? But in the limitations of these terms, both of you are prominent voices today of the language of the poetry in sense. And what makes it even powerful is that when we look back 40 years or 50 years or 70 years ago, the Indian English poetry was very westernized in the sense that, but now today we see ghazals being written in English. That also reminds us of Aga Shahid Ali, who wrote some brilliant, beautiful ghazals. And ever since there has been a so it reminds me of R.K. Narayan's work, where we feel like, Malgudi Days, when we read it, it feels like you are reading English in Kannada. Something like that is also happening with the Indian English poetry, where that Indianness or the sense of a subcontinent, your own roots are coming more prominently in your writing, and it is also affecting the language. It is also affecting the diction. It is affecting the styles. So, what are your thoughts on that as young writers? Where do you see this? How far have we come, and where do you see this going ahead? Is my question. So maybe Maz, you can start first, and then we'll ask Asia the same question.
I mean, in my case, it's a little obvious. My collection itself is called Ghazal Nama, and it has a number of ghazals. I read 2 ghazals today. Though I'm trying to now reduce writing the number of ghazals that I have. I mean, sort of go down a little, move in other directions as much. Though this collection also has other poetry, but I think it's a very strong and felt need. You mentioned Agha Shahid Ali. He really was the progenitor of the ghazal form, but the felt need for me also while growing up was to find my own culture and my own existence and my own traditions, and place myself within them. While English for a private school child in India almost automatically becomes this enforced professional language, whereas the language of home often, even today, does remain a regional language that we may have, or even multiple regional languages that we may have. Uh, so in some ways, Asia and I would share that Asia is also exposed to Urdu and Kashmiri. Of course, I don't know Kashmiri, but both of them then go back to Farsi as well. And her first poem that she read had Farsi influences. Another poem that she read uh, derived its title from Ghalib. And Ghalib has been a strong influence on me also, and Urdu and Farsi have been strong influences. I grew up in a locality where Ghalib used to live most of his life, Balli Maran. So I think that physical idea of a presence, of a specter of Ghalib, I think has always stayed with me also. But I think overall, so Assia and I are probably closer to each other in terms of our inherited legacies, linguistic and cultural. But even other poets, I'm sure, are all the time grappling with this multilingual identity that we all have as Indians, and trying to create an aesthetic appropriate to that. I think the early English writers, probably Dom Moraes or others, their idea of finding acceptability in English or the West was largely to completely anglicize themselves. I think 70 years have passed since independence, and perhaps we don't feel that kind of pressure anymore. There is some kind of a community and a readership within India, which is looking for this kind of poetry, and this is where we want to express and place ourselves. Yeah.
Asya, what are your thoughts on this?
Well, yeah, I agree with Maz that I mean there is an appropriation of the form, like we talked about Agha Shahid Ali or Maz is writing ghazals in English, and in both cases, like there's also a political strife which finds a voice through this another form, which is which kind of complements rather than dilutes the political or the whatever socio-political agent does there are. So that's one thing. And also the idea that there are these writers are becoming bolder and bolder in terms of adapting these forms, these original forms, or and not sticking to the type kind of the English writing as we used to say. And language, I think, yes, of course, I mean, the idea is to cater to a larger audience, but at the same time, as you said, that there are adaptations of the local myths, forms, in form of allusions, or in the form of the, whatever form they're using, the ghazal or other forms. That's becoming more and more, in fashion, and more people are using that. And that's a good thing. I mean, that kind of a thing. And I remember Agha Shahid Ali saying in one of the interviews, he's kind of really very excited about finding out and discovering that there was this form that he grew up with, a ghazal form, which could also be explored in English. And what is the ghazal form, for instance? I mean, it's also this lot of things, as Faruqi Saab says in one of his essays, that this, I mean, it's a universe in itself, and there are so many elements in there. But it's not just the language, but also the characters, the motifs, whichever are used, and if they're also replicated in English, and then it doesn't remain that that language barrier doesn't remain there. So basically, these are poems from other languages, but written in English. That way, I think that's the adaptation right now.
This is a very prominent point that you have brought in, that it's a need of the hour. It's not just there is a need, and there is also a readership, an audience that has gotten created for it. These are very good points that you put forward. uh, do you have anything else to share, Maz? I mean, I opened this up. I had told earlier also that we'll keep this conversation as casual as possible, since it's a panel discussion. I am not the only person who should be asking questions. If you want to share any thoughts, any question that you might have for Asya, or Asya, if you might have any question for Maz, you can ask.
I I have Asya's collection here. I've had it since it came out. I quite like it. Um, there are, I mean, it's not really a question, but perhaps Asya could respond. It's more of a comment. I notice, like, for example, there's this poem here that I like quite a lot. It's called Gifts for My Daughter Not Yet Conceived. There's another poem about Antigone. Um, Antigone, the Greek classical character, part of the Oedipus myth, who is caught with the conundrum of wanting to bury her dead brother, who was a traitor of sorts according to the state. He attacked his own city, Thebes, and Creon has forbidden him to be buried. Um, so, and there is, even in another poem that Asya read, there was also the concern of remembering the dead. So perhaps, I mean, I wonder sometimes, what will our future generations experience? What will their experiences be across the world, but particularly in India, and places and communities that we come from? What would happen to future generations there? Uh, Both because of our environmental concerns, our pathological concerns at the moment with this disease, also economic concerns, great economic hardships that large numbers of people are undergoing. This collection, of course, is, I think Asia's collection is greatly mired in that. So, I mean, she's already responded in her poems on what I'm saying. But I don't know if she could perhaps, if Asia would like to say a little more on these aspects. Is my reading of a lot of your work correct? I mean, this concern of generations to come and what to do with the dead and the living and those who might come in the future. Uh, so yeah, I don't know if maybe you'd like to read this poem, Gifts for My Daughter Not Yet Conceived, or perhaps you might wish to read a newer poem that you've written in this, or just comment. So yeah.
Thank you very much, Maz, for engaging with these poems. Thank you very much for your appreciation. Well, these two poems, I think the major, as the concern here is also, I mean, it's a very like a female voice with these characters talking about Antigone. I see her as a very strong women character in Greek mythology, and the act of defiance, the act of burial, which also, I mean, in this case finds echoes in the situation in Kashmir or elsewhere. Even right now, the burial is, with this pandemic, is becoming a situation which is quite defiant. And all those elements, particularly with this myth, and juxtaposition of certain local myths, I think that's also there. And I think it also leads to kind of a refusal of a certain geographical confinement, that you, as a you borrow these other myths from history, from other places, but also you kind of juxtapose them with your own myths, like for example Akunandan or other local myths which have the same concern about the dead and the living. And also one of the allusions is in these poems is also about from Shakespeare's Julius Caesar and other poems. So it just wants to show that the situations are like to some extent similar, and it takes the same amount of courage to do things which are not particularly which are against the norm or against the state, for that matter. So that's the major concern in these poems. And in the other poem, The Gifts to My Daughter, that's like, that's also, as you said, about the generations. What do we give to our generations, particularly the disputes that are there, and, that we give as, to our children in heredity, and what do they do about that? That's the main thing in that poem also. And it ends with also ends with Hamlet's unfinished line, "To be or not to be," which is some kind of an uncertainty which we are in the contemporary time.
Do you have any question for Maz? Would you like to ask anything to Maz?
Yes, I would like to ask. Maz is also a translator. I mean, in his poetry collection, Ghazal, now there's also there's translation, and then there is he's also translated Thicker Tausis, the sixth river also is translated, and the collection of the ghazals that is translated. One is his own ghazals, and there's another from other different Urdu poets that he's translated. And I find that collection, the very collection, absolutely brilliant. So I would like to know. It's not. I mean, know. What determines his choice of those poems that he collected, because that's absolutely brilliant, and I really enjoyed reading all those translations as well. Apart from his own poetry, which is also ghazal and also free work.
Oh, thank you, Asia, for your interest in the translation work I do. So I mentioned Ghalib already, and the fact that I grew up in Ballimaran, lived there 25 years of my life, the first 25 years. And those are formational years, of course. Moving Ghalib was around the corner, at least where he used to live, and his spectre somehow was present there. They've created not the best museum, but they have created a museum where he lives now. So I think Ghalib was a strong presence while growing up. Ghalib in his own time. So I think there are 8 ghazals, if I remember correctly, of Ghalib that I've translated here. Another reason for my interest in Ghalib's poetry was the fact that, of course, it is great poetry. He is arguably, not even arguably, I'd say he is probably the greatest Urdu poet of all time. But he was writing also with great emotion. And during the period of the decline of Delhi itself, there was relative prosperity when the British resident was in charge, and the Mughal king was the nominal king. But still, there was great decline, and he was facing great hardship. And to an extent, the decline continues in Old Delhi. The British New Delhi was created, and it almost barricaded Old Delhi out of the imagination. And though Old Delhi is romanticized today greatly, but if you live there, you actually experience a great decline of civic amenities and all of, and the quality of life there in some ways is good, that everything is available, there is good food still available. But in other ways, in terms of your sewage pipes and things like that, civic life can be horrible. So I think there was an identification in that sense of decline while living there for me. Also, his grief is so strong that it makes one forget one's own problems. One imagines, one finds one's own problems very small compared to the capacity of Ghalib, I feel, to feel grief. And that in itself always, listening to those Ghalib ghazals, forced me almost to make light of my own little problems. So that was my almost great devotion to Ghalib. That's the reason. And the reason to then translate that poetry was because I personally don't like many of the translations that exist, be it Ejaz Ahmad or whoever really. The translations of Ghalib, I don't like. They don't do justice to the form itself. As you were saying, Professor Farooqi, Shamsur Rahman Farooqi often talks about the ghazal being not just the prosody, but also a universe. Most translators, I think, try to only focus on one or the other. I, while translating, have tried to focus on both ideally, and even then shifting to my own creative writing, if I may add that. In my later ghazals, I feel some of them, like for example, Caravans of Love, and even the one that I read out later, Who Did It, I try to bring in characters from the traditional universe, such as that of the Hakim, and focus on love for radical potential, which is a traditional ghazal trope also. To move on to some of the other poems that I've chosen, there is a Bahadur Shah Zafar poem. I have translated more poetry. I didn't include all here. I included the ones here that I really liked. And some of them are Delhi poems. So Bahadur Shah Zafar, again, the last king of Delhi. There is a poem by Amir Khusro, who's a poet of Delhi, which is also here. Then there is a Kafi by Bulle Shah, which is also about syncretism and multiculturalism, though these terms are even newer in a sense than the kind of coexistence that used to be there in India. earlier. So I am invested in multiculturalism. My PhD work was on the politics of friendship, actually. And I've written about this sometimes elsewhere in op-eds and other things, also critically. So my investment in multiculturalism was also guiding force in picking the translations that I did here. And largely it is poetry that I like a lot myself.
Before we finish this session, Asia, there is one poem of yours. Unfortunately, I don't have your collection, but I did read up your poems that were available on the internet, and I came across a poem titled "Medusa in Burqa." It's a brilliant poem. It's a short, powerful poem. If you have it around you, would you like to share that poem? And with this reading, we will probably we'll end this discussion. Maybe as a
Okay.
closing note, a note of defiance to end today's conversation.
Again, this is taken from the Greek myth, and it's a very strong woman's voice, Medusa. So this is called Medusa in a Burqa. I run with the hand clenched between my teeth as your bomb-sniffing dogs bark at me. I sail on winged sandals across the sky, munching neoliberalism from chips packets. Helicopters span civilization on my head. You stamp my burqa on smart guns, but dare not look me into my eyes, for I'll turn you into a stone. I am a millennial Medusa, serpents under my veil.
To the audience who is listening to who is watching this video, thank you so much for joining. It was indeed a pleasure to listen to Asiya Zahoor and Maaz bin Bilal's such powerful, immensely wonderful poems. Thank you so much for joining in, Asiya. From Baramulla, Kashmir,
Thank you, sir.
you could join in and become a part of this festival. And thank you, Maz. This is the time, I think all of us believe, is where when poetry is something that is needed, where defiance is needed, where standing up for what you believe is right is needed, especially during the COVID times, where when there is so much of degradation of rights that is happening, and there are mental health issues that are on the rise. So I think poetry has a lot more potential, and I wish you all the best with your writing and with your work ahead.